the compilations, the funny things.
Yep. All right. Welcome everyone to what I'm calling episode 1 of the Summoning Hour. Now that it's not all about me, I've got a guest here, my brother, Andrew Belousek. He is a lead SDET at Bungie and lifelong gamer like myself. So we're going to get into a little bit of how he went down the path he did, what's interesting to him, where his focus is with games, the gaming industry, esports, and management. So we'll just kind of jump right into it.
Cool.
Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, more than what I just explained?
Cool. So the TLDR of 30-something years of life. That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
All right. Dang.
Well, it's funny that you even word it that way, is because that means gaming has been a majority of your life.
Oh yeah. No, like the beginning is very distinct in my head when we were living in Alaska and Dad would go downstairs. He had the Commodore 64 hooked up to that like rickety little wooden entertainment center. Mm-hmm. I think of it as rickety now. It's probably fine. But yeah, like we would go down there. There's the couch. We would sit on the couch and watch him play. Like there was, what was the bicycle game with delivering newspapers? Paperboy.
Paperboy, yeah.
Yeah, there was that. There was the Atari games. Like we played the Olympic Games with him, mm-hmm. like just rattling a joystick back and forth as fast as humanly possible.
Right.
But yeah, it was him playing Questron and me going, what is this? Like there's an actual world in there, and wait, you have to buy swords and weapons, and there's like a sense of persistence. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much like the first time that I think a lot of people read books and go, oh my God, I just built a world in my head. I want to do this more. And yeah. So no, that like has absolutely been, I don't know how old I was. It was Alaska, so I had to be like 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was very ingrained in my head. And ever since then, just loved everything about video games. The creativity, the sound, the music, the graphics, the like animations that go into it, just understanding how such a thing can exist. It started very long ago.
I'll start off with a funny memory and story, just kind of going on about how much gaming has been a part of your life that I remember.
Oh no.
We were in Oklahoma, so this was like the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, and you decided that you were going to start growing your hair out.
Okay. Yep.
Because you started reading more about game developers, and you had done a huge like research thing on John Carmack.
Oh God.
And he had been in like PC Gamer or something like that, like the stereotypical 90s nerd, arms crossed, ponytail. Sure. And it's just like in my memory, I don't know how true this was, but in my memory, it's like you studied John Carmack, and then like the next day you decided you had to grow your hair out and you had to have a ponytail.
I don't remember that at all. Like, it's entirely possible. Like I'm a goldfish in terms of memory. Totally possible. What I remember about that is literally went to Supercuts the day before, got a haircut, and then as I was walking out of Supercuts, I was like, "Hey, Mom, I think I want to grow my hair out." And she just stared at me dumbfounded.
Yeah, I can't imagine she was very happy about that. So gaming has been a huge part of your life. Mm-hmm. And how did you decide that engineering and programming was the route that you wanted to go?
Man, so there was one time, there was definitely a false start, at least, where I remember thinking, yep, video games, want to learn how to make these. There was obviously the parents like, you can't make a living out of video games. But I really wanted to learn. I remember Mom taking me to the library and me looking up books on Visual Basic, because that was the thing. Like, I guess I was mostly just looking up coding and Commodore 64 coding. And Basic was a thing. I started digging into Basic and got books that I looked at and had a bunch of line numbers with a bunch of instructions I didn't understand. It was a completely different language. And I tried to type some of it in, but it made no sense to me. That was pretty demoralizing, actually. I was kind of like, oh crap, maybe I don't know how to make video games. It's way beyond what I can do. I don't even remember how old I was. Young enough that it was Mom take me to the library.
Yeah.
But then I mean, still continue to play games. I think part of it was dabbling a little bit in the modding community, like modding with tribes.
Yeah.
Understanding how the map editor, like it wasn't a first class editor. It was
No.
trying to wire up the generators to the different features and like the force fields and things in your base, the turrets. Playing with the map editors, playing with like the Doom, like I think it was Doom Ed, I think was the editor.
Sounds about right.
Seeing the community, what they could do with all the crazy cool .wad modifications. So I think dabbling a little bit in that and really understand, like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to draw and animate, but I wanted to still be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so engineering seemed like the thing that I wanted to do, because it's kind of the backbone of creating games. Even if I'm not doing the art, it's what runs in the background. And then, yeah, it was in junior high that I started, again, looking at the C#, C++ books, and yeah, spent a couple of years teaching it to myself before getting into college. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's amazing. Self-teaching. Nowadays, there's like C#, C++ classes in every high school, and even in some junior highs, from what I've understood.
Yeah, even Mom's elementary school, there's I think it was, so it's Girls That Code after school program. I think most of them are, I don't know, like just early teens, 12 to 14-year-old girls that are learning the program, which is awesome.
Yeah. Could you imagine having had that support at school instead of self-teaching yourself?
Kind of
having that support, that would have been, I mean, it's fantastic that things have developed this way, and that everyone's kind of recognizing that programming is one of those skills that it's just unfoundedly productive and beneficial for anyone to understand and to know. Whether or not you do anything with it, it's going to, and it probably already is, impacting the way people work and join in on different teams.
So I think you're hitting on a few different things there. One is do I think it would have been more productive, as well as what do I kind of think of programming being more pervasive? So I'll hit that one, the pervasiveness. It's awesome. Like it's amazing to see. I think it is one of those kind of core skill sets that I would love to see alongside math, science, history, civics. You know, the core sorts of classes that we toss into schools. Yeah, I absolutely believe that it will drastically impact the quality of life of everyone that knows how to code, and because it can change how you think about problems. It lets you break problems down into simpler components, lets you think about the logic behind it. How do you think about it in the simplest terms, reducing complexity, and seeing tasks. You can see things and think, man, I could go do things that I enjoy if I didn't have to do this other thing, and automate those things. There's a big push for that in many industries. And what's also cool is you're absolutely right, is it can be applied to any domain. You can take coding and it applies to not just like games or software, traditionally like productivity software like Word or Outlook. It applies to physics, cataloging the stars. It applies to medicine. It applies to biology. You can look at a lot of like the genetic editing software out there. Like these are the tools of the future, and software powers a lot of them. So yeah, I absolutely think the pervasiveness is awesome. I think it's really great that it's being introduced to people at a younger and younger age, and becoming more accessible. Rewinding a little bit to the prior question of, do I think it would have been good versus me having to self-teach?
Yeah.
That's a hard one, man, because while self-teaching was difficult, and it took me about a couple years to really get things clicking.
Right.
I was able to learn at my own pace, because I feel like in a classroom, coding really is not super intuitive. Maybe it is for some people. It definitely wasn't for me. And I think in a classroom environment where you're trying to cram so much into your head very quickly, if it's not intuitive, it's very easy to fall behind or to feel like you're failing.
Yeah.
So I think in many ways, me being able to go at my own pace was beneficial. I could see people being put off of coding because they go into a classroom and either they're not taught in a way that syncs with them, or the problem can become exacerbated. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've mentioned is that between modding communities and like your own desire to go in and dive in to learn this is that it comes down to basically one thing. You've got to go in and do the work.
Yeah.
Like if you're not going to be practicing what you're learning and keeping it fresh in your head, and I know I've had a few false starts with like SQL and Python and C++, and just like, hey, I'm going to start taking these courses or looking at things online like Udemy, but I never get into that cycle of constantly using what I've learned. Yep. And so it's in one ear and out the other real fast.
Sure.
And it's, I'll pick it back up as soon as I start up again, but it's that kind of false start like you mentioned. So I think that it's definitely down to, if you're not already going somewhere like DigiPen or like another university that's starting its gaming program, that it comes down to getting involved one way or another. And it's considerably easier than 10 years ago when you and I were starting to dabble in this area.
Sure.
But find your online community, find a game that you care about, and start modding it.
Sure. I think, I mean, you can look at recruiters for various companies. They want to see your portfolio of what have you done.
Yeah.
It's the, hey, where's the passion, the drive to understand how things work and then change them. I think the community, the game, are a huge part of it. It's the immersing yourself in the thing you want to learn. Much like learning a language, you have to immerse yourself in the language, otherwise it will go in one ear and out the other. The repetition, the constant usage. It's almost just like exercise. You have to do the work frequently, otherwise, you get back out of shape. And that's how it works. You can get back into shape quickly-ish if you've done it and you remember how your body works and how the muscles work, than someone doing it the first time. But you still have to do the maintenance.
Yep. So lesson number one that will come from all of this, whether you're an artist, a designer, an engineer, a producer, HR, ops, whatever, you have to go in there and dedicate time to learning and doing constantly.
Yep.
It's if you already have your 9 to 5, but you want to get into the games industry, or you want to change paths and you're in that industry already, and this is going to be my own personal thing because this is what I've been doing, cut an hour of sleep and use that extra hour to do what it is you want to be doing.
Yeah.
And prioritize that time. Like you said, it's just like exercise. You have to be consistent about it, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere with your goals.
Yep.
So now you've not been in the management track up until you started at Bungie. And so now I'm curious because I was actually in management before you.
Yep.
And so we had talked a little bit about what I was learning, and now you are fresh in this role within 2 years?
Yeah.
So in 2 years' time, what has been like your greatest struggle with jumping into management?
So I will give a little more context. At Microsoft, I was working on a project where there was 5 contractors that were already working on this project. It was organizing a lot of our results of our various test execution harnesses. We unfortunately had 4 different harnesses executing our tests, and all the results were spit out in different ways.
Oh boy.
And so it was very difficult for anyone higher up to understand the state of the product. Could we launch today? This is a difficult question to answer. And so I worked on a system to unify all those outputs into a single manageable interface. That was my very first exposure to management, but it was very ad hoc. I was told, here's 5 contractors, go. I was not officially a manager. I was more of an engineering lead at that point. So I wasn't responsible for people's careers. I was purely responsible for architecture, code reviews, doling out the tasks to get people to work on specific things. That was my first interaction in terms of directing people. But yeah, the Bungie track was definitely a different step because it's part lead, part manager, and has shifted more and more towards manager with lead accents to it. And what I mean by that is I've become more responsible for growing people's careers and directing people in terms of how they think and approach problems, as well as how do I help them reach their career goals.
Yeah.
Which is very different from, well, let me look at your code and say, no, follow these design patterns, or hey, did you know about this other system over here that you'll have to interact with? There's still some of that, but it's much more conversational versus my day-to-day.
Right.
So yeah, pretty fresh in the management track. I think there's a few different directions my brain goes. One is, I didn't expect myself to end up as a manager. I saw myself as, I enjoy writing code. That's what I want to do. I want to continue writing code day to day. And I definitely knew that I wanted to go towards the architect route in terms of, I want to understand large scale systems. I want to understand all the pieces and get them to align prettily.
Okay.
Get the pieces to fit together, not have extraneous bits and bobs. Architecture astronaut is the term you'll see floating around.
Nice.
Spend more time coming up with a pretty system than actually writing code.
Can you get that on a business card?
Probably.
Nice.
I think the other end of the spectrum is the duct tape programmer, where you're just going to slap stuff together and it'll work, probably. But anyway, that was the route I saw myself on. And it was when I was talking to Harrison, my current manager, he was selling me on the idea that, well, maybe there's another way to get to the architect goal of, if you lead people, you get to steer multiple people in a direction, and you get to set that direction. And so you can influence the patterns in ways that they are going to write their code or approach problems, or perhaps the sorts of problems you want to solve as a team. And that group direction definitely has kind of a multiplicative effect in terms of what you're able to impact versus a one-man army.
Yeah.
And so that sold me on the, I totally want to go down this path. It was definitely my own goal that originally got me on the path. And it wasn't until a few months into it, probably 6 months into it, that it really clicked. Oh man, as much as I want to be progressing my own career, it really is, the job is progressing their careers.
Yeah.
Growing people.
Yep.
And that was a pretty profound feeling of a little bit of fear, but also kind of a warm, happy feeling in my chest of, oh man, I get to grow people. That's bananas.
A little sci-fi evil scientist kind of.
No, it was much more benevolent than that, actually. And I think I started off with only 2 reports and have grown up to 5 reports now. And I think one of the biggest things that's been helpful to me is the leadership team at Bungie, all the way from senior leadership down through the management chain to my direct manager, all genuinely care about people. The people wanting to be part of the company. There's a very familial bond with the people at Bungie. And I think that helps a ton with remembering, no, they're not just your reports. They're people that you want to help succeed and become more successful. And I think that mentality that's very pervasive there helped kind of ooze its way into me. And so being influenced by those people and those aspects have, I believe, helped me become as good a manager as I could be in the couple of years that I've been doing it. So I'm very thankful for that. So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
So coming into it where it was just like you have that moment of like, now I'm responsible for growing people's careers. Was there anything particularly challenging like with that mind shift, or even with the idea that you're no longer kind of boots on the ground coding, and now you're that one step removed from whatever projects you're on?
Yes. So both things. I think the boots on the ground thing I'll answer first because that's pretty quick. No, absolutely. At first I thought I was going to be 50% coding IC time, individual contributor, myself, and then 50% management. It very quickly shifted to more management and strategy and lead-oriented work, where I'd say it was more of a 80-20 split.
Yeah.
So very quickly changed. It gave me a very healthy understanding of the amount of time it takes simply to be pointing many people in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that was one thing, getting used to I'm not going to be writing as much code as I thought I was.
Yeah.
That was a bit of shell shock. I think it took me almost a full year before I thought, oh, this doesn't bug me anymore. There was that nagging of, I don't feel like I'm contributing. I don't feel like I'm producing a thing. Instead, I'm just going to meetings, or as at Bungie, we affectionately call them coffee drinkers. I'm just drinking coffee. That is my job. So it's weird to not write a line of code.
Have you had that switch where you're no longer feeling like you're not productive, as it is you're looking at those you're responsible for and seeing how productive they are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you're viewing your productivity through their productivity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's still some of my own, because there's still responsibilities that I want to tackle on my own, but it's taken me about 2 years to actually have that full flip of, no. If I keep them going in the right direction, holistically, things are getting better. And it's weird. I don't even think about what am I doing. Granted, there's plenty that I'm doing. It's easy to also think that you're not doing as much as you might imagine. I don't know. That seems to be a mentality that I'm going to go a little off into the weeds.
Sure.
A lot of the management that I'm aware of, we all have this mentality of we could always be doing more.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's humility or recognizing that we're all slothful. I don't think we're all slothful. No, I think it's we all definitely want to excel and do better. But yeah, that click has definitely happened, where I look at, if any of my guys are struggling, or excelling. I take great joy from seeing them excel and seeing them be happy with their careers.
Absolutely.
Or if I see them struggling, that's where my concern is. It's not ever going to be, I don't think I can ever go back to the world of, oh, well, you're not doing great. Well, I'm going to tell you you're not doing great, and I'm going to go back over to my little world of doing my own work.
Yeah. Man, that is one of the hardest things that I have found. So when I switched from assistant QA manager and over to testing for a month when I was at Microsoft, and then over to production, where I've been now, is I couldn't imagine a time where I'm not giving people feedback anymore, or it's just like something goes off in a meeting and it's like there's that stillness in the air where everyone inhales and just kind of waits and see how everyone else plays it out. Like after that meeting, I go to that person and it's just like, hey, can I give you some feedback from my perception, from my perspective, from how I read the room?
Yeah.
I see this is what happened in that exchange. Maybe next time you do this instead of this.
Sure.
That kind of stuff. I could not imagine not being able to give feedback anymore, or not being in that position where I'm not trying to help develop someone, regardless of whether or not they're my individual contributor. Certainly not if they're my boss. Sure. Like that's the one avenue I've never broached, is just like, hey, you know how you could do that better, boss? Like, no. That's not one threshold I care to cross at this point.
I assume at some point, because I know I'm not there either, I assume we'll get there as well. I look at a lot of my leadership team and they seem to have that familiarity and trust in one another. I definitely want to touch on that, is the feedback and the way that you phrased your feedback. From my perspective, here's what I saw, here's what I believe. The use of I language, the immediacy of the feedback. These were all things I was never aware of 2-3 years ago. I was even just dimly aware of them a year ago.
Yeah.
It's amazing to be immersed in a culture. I know you've done a bunch of podcasts and research to understand better how to use these concepts, whereas I'm just kind of being steeped in it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Like I'm so thankful that I have the culture surrounding me to learn.
Sure, absolutely.
It's very self-reinforcing, but yeah, I think one of the really cool aspects there is that not only does it make you a much better manager and help people grow, which is awesome for their own growth, just for themselves, I think it helps you be a generally better person.
Yeah.
Effective communication is awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if there's so here's a couple of nuggets. One, if you are not giving or having your own one-on-one weekly, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're not giving yourself the opportunity to get feedback in a fast enough manner so that you can be tweaking things. Because that feedback and your immediate reaction to getting negative or positive feedback, whether you're told you need to stop doing this or do this less often and you need to do this more often,
Yep.
regardless of what the feedback is, if you're not getting it, you are staling and becoming stagnant. And your boss is not doing you any favors. Sure. I mean, regardless of your position, and I'm going to take a note from manager tools on this, regardless of your position, who wouldn't want more feedback about how they're doing instead of waiting for that quarterly review or that biannual review or that annual review where your whole next year is already decided?
Yeah.
Like, if you're not asking for feedback, you are doing yourself a disservice. Regarding like timeliness, if you have a meeting that goes wrong with someone and you wait 2-3 weeks to address the behavior that was there or whatever happened, it's going to be so far gone out of that person's mind, you have lost your opportunity to imprint the importance of that change.
Sure.
But then also it's going to be gone that they don't understand where this feedback is coming from, and you don't want to be surprising directs with feedback.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. Again, was not very aware of this until relatively recently in my life.
It's because he didn't talk to me.
That's true. At least not about manager stuff too much. But yeah, just to reiterate on that, Bungie is very much shifting towards a culture of immediate feedback. We want feedback to be continuous. We don't want to wait for that quarterly or biannual process.
And among peers, that blunt honesty, it will create some conflict, but that conflict is going to be necessary from everyone moving forward, because the conflict isn't so much that I'm right, you're wrong kind of thing, as it is, this is my perception and this is your perception of the problem, and we need to get on the same page.
Yep.
And figure out that same direction that we're going with. That there's likely going to be compromise, and one of us may not be entirely happy, but when it comes down to this kind of cross-disciplinary approach to that a lot of teams are taking, is that we have to negotiate and figure out what that right path is for the both of us. Because you have, like, as an engineer, you have your own requirements and your own desirables. How things are done and what is actually possible, because there's a lot of concerns for performance, whether it's server or the CPU or GPU or response time, all that kind of stuff.
Frankly, a lot of the time is how much of a pain in the ass will it be to maintain.
There you go. And the scalability. While like designers may be just like, I want these knobs to twist and tune and everything. And so everyone kind of negotiating their perception and their own biases to follow that together requires candid nature, especially among peers.
Everything you just said, we wrap up in the simple word alignment. And also the honesty. They recommend, our leadership team has recommended reading Radical Candor.
Radical Candor.
Yeah, fantastic book.
Okay.
Would definitely recommend.
It's on my list, and now it's out there. All right, let's shift gears away from management and more.
Can I do one more? Sorry to interject.
No, by all means.
When you were talking about the immediate feedback, I'm going to do a dumb example. It's like Black and White, the video game back in the day. Your pet would eat a person. You're like, no, bad. Don't do that.
So he's talking about Lionhead Studios. This was probably early 2000s, early 2000s. Peter Molyneux and Lionhead Studios, Black and White. It was a god game. The player played a god, and you had this giant pet.
I'm not trying to imply that managers are gods.
Oh, that's good to clarify. But this game was very much a pet simulator.
Reports are not pets either.
They are minions.
No. I will not go on the record saying that.
Okay. Anyways, black and white.
Yeah, but anyway, it's exactly the immediacy is important because somebody does a thing, you need to let them know if that's good or bad and why, so that they'll either repeat or not repeat the behavior.
And I'll take it a step further for anyone who is actually a pet owner, your dog or your cat does something that you don't like, and you have that 6-second window to spray them in the face with water if they don't like water, to say this behavior gets this reaction.
Yeah.
Or it's just the opposite. You feed them a treat for doing the right thing. Very similar. People are not pets. Just saying, immediacy matters.
Yes.
All right, now we'll switch gears.
Okay.
Gaming in general. What is going on in the industry or in games that is interesting to you lately?
There's lots of things that are interesting.
Could be tech, could
Sure.
be games, could be mechanics, could be a perception shift amongst gamers.
Sure.
Go for it.
I'll just let my brain run wild. I think it's cool to see that indie, which is a very overloaded term, I think, but small studios are still very successful. I think once upon a time, I was worried that AAA was the only way things would go. I think the Steam culture of being able to self-publish, I think seeing things like PUBG that are very not refined and then becoming more and more refined as they become popular. The evolution of games I think that's actually what I'm getting at is you can see evolutionary games as they're being developed and improved, you can play them, which is really neat. Minecraft, I think, kind of spearheaded that.
Right.
And seeing more and more of that. Thoroughly enjoy that. What other fun things in the industry? I find myself, personally, I see myself doing more of what I never understood before of the bite-sized games. I don't find myself sitting down to play Witcher 3 for 100 hours straight or Skyrim.
Oh, interesting.
I've seen myself making that shift of I want something that's more bite-sized.
Yeah.
Whether it's an hour or recently the Switch, playing Celeste, the 2D platform.
Yeah.
I will play for a couple of levels and then put it down. The ability to suspend and resume pretty seamlessly is very powerful.
I have to admit, that's one of my favorite features on the Xbox One, is like I'll start a game and then I'll power down the Xbox entirely, but then the next day I'll come on and I'll just press A on the little tile, and it loads up as if the game was just paused.
Yeah.
And not having to go through 20 minutes of like initial loading, the title screen stuff. It's like I'm back in the game, and that low friction to get back into it has been amazing, considering that a lot of my priority is that bite-sized gaming of like, I need to be able to get in and do something in 15, 20, 30 minutes and not be willing to be distracted after that or have other things come up that are more priority. So I definitely agree with you that that's been a huge gateway for me to be gaming again.
Sure. Man, what else is interesting? Oh, I personally am not part of this. My friends love cell phone games where part of it is they can let the game grind itself once they hit a certain level.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen this in a few, there's a Star Wars game, there's a Marvel game.
Oh, yeah, it's basically